Welcome to today's Digitech Systems webinar series event, Paper is the Enemy of Control, presented by Sean Morris on behalf of Digitech Systems Professional Services. I'm Christina Robbins, Marketing Manager for Digitech Systems. And before we get started, I wanted to go over just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is a closed audio session, but we want to encourage you to ask questions. They can be typed into the questions section of the webinar interface, and we will have some time to address those questions at the end of the presentation. You can minimize the webinar window by clicking the small arrow on the toolbar and return the interface to full size by choosing that same small arrow. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive an email within the next day or so with a link to the recorded file, and we will also be posting the webinar to MyDSI in the near future. So I'm pleased to welcome our guest speaker today, Sean Morris, who is here on behalf of Digitech Systems Professional Services. Sean has more than 15 years experience in the ECM market. He is currently serving as Digitech Systems Director of Sales. Sean is focused on developing and strengthening channel selling systems and reseller strategies, and he is responsible for managing Digitech Systems reseller base, industry forecasting, and driving revenue. Having almost 10 years with Digitech Systems, Sean is an expert in identifying potential business partners, negotiating agreements, and all activities associated with reseller and channel support. He is well-versed in designing systems that meet the unique needs of end users in a wide variety of industries, including healthcare. And with that, Sean, the time is yours.
Well, thank you, Christina. I appreciate that. And thank you all, first of all, for joining us today. I'm excited to share with you our topic of discussion, which is the integration with PaperVision Enterprise and Microsoft Dynamics for Great Plains. My question for you is simple. What if you had a product that you could go sell to over 83,000 businesses in the U.S. today? The answer is now you do. In a recent survey of ERP applications that organizations use across America, Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains was the front runner and choice of companies in the medium to small tier space. And the great news here is that most of these customers out there have a need for document management, and even better, there's probably a good percentage of your customer base that exists today that already is using the application, and this is an opportunity for you to go back to those customers and bring additional value. We're going to talk about some call to action plans and how to get started, but I've asked Dave Clark of our Professional Services Department to first come on today and take you through the integration as a user would see it and a user would use the product in their day-to-day environment. So I'm going to ask Dave to go ahead and take control. And Dave, walk us through this integration with Great Plains.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to take you through a couple of screens and a couple of features that we enabled in Great Plains. Professional Services' goal is to roll out more of these integrations with standard line of business applications, enabling you to open up more opportunities to sell PaperVision and Image Silo. In doing that, we looked at really basic functionality that we think everybody would like to start with, and we built a base package, basically a starting point for everybody to approach these accounts and start working with basic requirements that they may have, and all of this is expandable pretty much anywhere within these products. To start with, we figured that image enablement was the most common thing that people wanted to do, so the ability to retrieve a copy of an invoice or retrieve a copy of a vendor invoice, a customer invoice, and then possibly the entry of transactions. So if I'm entering a payment for a customer, I want to scan that document immediately rather than having to make a note on it and scan it later, and the same thing for entering invoices that come in through the mail or however I want to bring them in. But we basically set it up so that you can accomplish the indexing and entry of an invoice all in one step by invoking the scanner immediately to scan, capture the data from the screen, and update the indexes at the same time. So I'm going to take you through the retrieval of images that have already been stored both for the sales and purchasing side of the application. And I do want to mention that this is unique to Dynamics Great Plains, because Microsoft does refer to their CRM package as Dynamics as well. Not that we can't integrate with that, but we just haven't built a package for it yet. So what you're going to see today is specifically Microsoft Dynamics for Great Plains, and it is the PaperVision Enterprise Integration Tool. Starting off with the sales side of Great Plains, you've got two different inquiry modes here on the bottom right hand of the screen: transaction by customer or transaction by document. By customer lets you choose a customer and then displays a list of any transactions for that account. By document lets you do the same lookup, but by document number rather than by customer. If I display transaction by customer, I have an option to choose a customer ID here. I'm just going to go ahead and pick the first one, Aaron Fitz Electrical. And so what you have here is a display of what Great Plains refers to as document numbers, but it's basically any sales transaction that was generated for this account. We enabled the integration to work two different ways. This is what we would call a summary list or a report. In other words, everything on the screen is a transaction. Now, most of the time when you're integrating, this is one of the most difficult screens to integrate from, because I don't really have an easy way to select an item from it and use that data in that line to retrieve the image. However, in Great Plains, we were able to enable that feature from the screen. So all I have to do is click on any one of the transactions, and what you're going to see in the Great Plains window is right next to the common Windows toolbar items, there is a PaperVision Enterprise integration icon. Anytime that you're in a screen that has an integration complete for it, that icon will appear. If you're in a screen that there are no integrations defined for, the icon won't be there. If for some reason you're in a screen that you know has an integration and you don't see the icon, check your taskbar down here, because the application itself does have to be running in Windows. And you can set it to automatically start every time your workstation starts. But this client, pretty much like most integration tools, has to be running as an application so that it's listening to and interfacing with the Windows desktop. Once I select the line item, I can click the integration button. And this is going to scrape that line data and bounce right out, in this case, the image silo, and retrieve that particular document from the project in image silo. So if you take a look here, this is invoice number 1025. Customer it was for, same customer, everything that we saw on the previous screen. In addition to retrieving it from the list, if I happen to have drilled down into the document for viewing, I can actually open up the document, and I'll have the same capability or same action that I can generate from the document detail. So I can either retrieve this from my list of all transactions for the customer, or maybe I've drilled down and looked at the actual transaction and decided then that I needed to see the invoice. I have the same capability to retrieve that invoice right here. So both from the summary screen or list screen and from the invoice detail screen, I can retrieve directly from image silo or PaperVision. There's some setup that goes on in the beginning, and that's part of our implementation effort that includes defining the URL. So whether it's silo or a local PVE install, the project ID, and maybe the index fields if they're slightly different than what we use to define our project. But that's all configurable as part of the install. Once you install our installation package, and the first time you run it, the user will be prompted to enter in their username and password for image silo or PaperVision, and that's stored and hidden, and it's unique to their profile. So if they're not logged into the workstation, that username and password is not saved for them. It's not as if someone else could log in and use the same credentials to access ImageSilo or PaperVision. For the purchasing screen, or basically what is the vendor transaction screen, we have the same capability, transaction by vendor, transaction by document. If I click on that and choose a vendor, I have the ability to retrieve any one of the documents that are listed here. So for our testing, we went ahead and loaded this invoice. And it's the same capability. I can retrieve from the list or summary screen, or I can drill down into the detail and perform the same retrieval from that screen. As you can see, it's pretty slick. It doesn't require you to do anything but be on the transaction you want and click the button. Besides image enablement, one of the things that we looked at was, what else would I want to do? You know, we had to have a starting point. Image enablement kind of is the starting point for every line of business app. I at least want to be able to be in my daily line of business application and retrieve documents that are relevant to a specific customer. And you might notice that we have that displaying document, not list, but those are options as well. I could display a list and then choose, or I can open up the first document that matches my criteria. So the next thing we thought was, well, what if I'm doing payables entry and I want to immediately capture that transaction and capture those indexes, capture that document right at that point? Why would I want to have to write down a voucher number, send it to somebody else to be scanned and indexed, and have to either run some sort of match and merge or have them manually index the document again later? So what we did on the purchasing screen for transaction entry, you can create your voucher, enter all the relevant data for the vendor's invoice, and you can scan this document. At this point, we will scrape everything off this screen that's relevant to that voucher. So the vendor ID, the name, the voucher number, the voucher date, the document number, which is usually the vendor's invoice number, and the amount of the invoice. So everything that you have to key in to complete the transaction in Great Plains becomes immediately available for indexing the document. There's no other process you have to follow. The action button right here will actually launch your scanner and prompt you to insert the document and scan the document for you. And Tony's going to go ahead and throw in a sample document for me so we can do this. I don't have the scanner. The first message you get, and if you all have worked with our Scan New Document feature, you know that it's expecting that you've already put the paper in. So we did change it a little bit so that we will confirm with you that you've got the paper in the scanner before it starts. Once you click OK, it'll activate the scanner, scan whatever is in the feeder as a document, and then it will give you the option to add additional pages. If you don't want to add any additional pages, the next screen you get will be the indexing screen, and it's already populated, as you can see. It's picked the document type from the Great Plains screen. It's picked the document number, which is vendor invoice number, the vendor ID, the vendor name, the invoice total, and the voucher number and voucher date from the Great Plains screen. If I don't want to make any changes to any of this, all I have to do is click Save, and we immediately upload the document and notify you that the document's been uploaded to PaperVision. So you, at this point, can immediately go out, or anybody can go out and retrieve that document. If I bounce back over to our transaction by vendor, pick that same vendor, there's that invoice, and retrieve it. we had 2 samples. This is the 3rd one I just did. I was going to make a note and change the transaction number so it came up differently, but I forgot to do that. But you can see right away that that invoice has already been added, already been indexed. And where you don't have a high volume scanning operation, or where you don't have a workflow that you're using, we find a lot of small businesses that are using accounting software like Great Plains, or even up to medium businesses. They're not doing anything to help themselves at this point route documents through a workflow. They're still moving paper around. So we thought having this point of entry right when they enter that payables transaction and being able to scan and put that document away without duplicating effort would be a real win for them. So the basic integration pieces we've done so far have been around sales and purchasing, or what you would call customer and vendor transactions. We performed the image enablement on those 2 applications, either from a detail by vendor or customer, by document, or by vendor or customer themselves. And then we enabled the transaction entry screen so that when you're entering a payment or entering an invoice, both the payment on the receivable side, the invoice on the vendor side, you can scan and index the document in one single operation without having to rekey any data. This integration can be expanded. We put this together as a starter kit, basically, with what we believe are the basic functions somebody would look for. But there's nothing that prevents us from expanding that into other areas of the application. In the past 3 years, we've been talking about Great Plains integration, and it's been hard to get anybody to define what exactly they wanted to see. So we decided we're going to build something. We're going to put in what we think are the starting points for everybody. And then we have always the capability to expand it well beyond what we're starting with. But we really think as a beginning tool, this is very powerful. We think that it's an easy sell, and it doesn't require any changes to the Great Plains application, which is a win, because most other integrations want you to modify a screen or place a button or do something that is going to impact your ability to upgrade the product or incur additional costs as you upgrade through different versions. This is completely outside of the application. It doesn't require me to do anything to Great Plains to make this work, and I think that's what the real power of the integration is. It's a strong integration, but it doesn't impact my use of the product, and allows me to keep my upgrade cycle and keep and maintain the latest versions of my product.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate you taking us through that today. And as Dave mentioned, this is, the basic package. So let's go ahead and talk about what pricing for the application looks like. So the basic integration, which includes everything that you've seen, and one single user, is $2,750. So remember, these are basically named users. Additional users are $575 a piece. When we talked with a number of the folks out there using Great Plains, and 1 or 2 of the resellers that are Great Plains resellers, they felt that our pricing strategy was well within the range for the customers who are using Great Plains today. And obviously, there's a tremendous return on investment. So here's our call to action. My challenge to you would be to reach out to your CDM, work with your CDM to create a survey or an outbound campaign. It might be a phone call. Again, it could be an electronic survey to reach out to your customers and figure out which customers are actually using Great Plains. I'm sure you're going to find that there are a lot of them. Once you've identified your customers, you can also work with your CDM to create an outbound call campaign to those customers that are using Great Plains, and get them set up to walk through the application. I'm sure once they see the application running, they'll understand the benefits and see the return on investment. Okay, at this time, I think we'll go to questions. Casey Wool had a question about what are the tools that we're basically using to develop this integration that we have. So Casey, we have a number of tools that are available to us in professional services, as well as a lot of code that we've written in the background. And again, this is the basic package. I think what you're going to find is your customers are going to say, well, you know, I would like to have this screen integrated, or maybe this screen integrated. And we fully expect that. And what I would encourage you to do is reach out to professional services and have them provide a quote for additional screens. Let's see, are there any other questions? Well, no? Okay. Well, I want to thank you folks for joining our webinar today. Again, I would encourage you to reach out to your CDM to develop your outbound survey and your outbound call messaging script. And remember, we're here to help. We don't win until you do. So get us involved in these opportunities. Let us help you with these opportunities. I think this is provides a tremendous amount of value to customers who are already your customers. And who's easier to go back and sell to? Those who have already made the decision and chosen you as their vendor. And I think that they will be happy that you did so. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call us. And thank you again. We'll talk to you all soon.